There are a lot of games made that play it completely safe, and they're not the most exciting out there. I'm not saying they're bad, but they're not typically blowing anybody out of the water. To make something truly new, innovative, and mind-blowing, you gotta do something dangerous. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 games that took the biggest risks. Starting off at number 10, it's Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, just making a sequel to Dragon's Dogma looks pretty risky in today's highly risk-averse AAA games market. The original had a mixed reception, but it was a name that people recognized. It was a known property. It grew a cult following over the years, so Capcom could have just taken the name and made something more traditional out of it, but they didn't. Instead of making something more like Skyrim or Monster Hunter or anything that's tried and tested, with Dragon's Dogma 2, they instead decided to double down on the things that made the original unique. The single save slot, the unusual controls, the opaque quest design. It's all back in Dragon's Dogma 2, and somehow they've made the game even more inexplicable. It's unabashedly old school in so many ways. I don't just mean the difficulty. There's no starting dodge roll, no lock-on mechanics. The entire pawn system is strange. The quest design rarely explains what you're actually exactly supposed to be doing and how to do it. It's an all-around odd and challenging game.
What's coming to you?
Feast your eyes on this!
Depending on the type of player, this is all refreshingly classic or infuriatingly outdated. Throw in a whole mess of performance issues and you've got a highly divisive game. A game people either love or hate isn't always risky, but in this case it really is. Capcom's internal studios know their stuff at this point. They can make a crowd-pleasing game in their sleep. Well, I'm exaggerating, they probably can't do that, but they know what they're doing, is what I'm saying. They could have gone the safe route with Dragon's Dogma 2, but they chose not to instead. They made a highly systematic game with a lot of ambitious ideas and intentionally aggravating game design decisions. Yeah, at this point, Capcom pretty much knows anything it makes is going to have an audience, so it's not like Dragon's Dogma 2 could have been a total failure, but they absolutely took a lot of big swings with the game design here, and while they didn't always hit, it's still nice to see a major game from a big publisher that's weird. Just nice when a big developer bucks the trends.
Goblins! What rotten luck! We've need of your aid again, sir.
At number 9 is Alien Isolation. This is another one of those games that on the surface doesn't sound risky at all. The Alien franchise is huge, it's published by Sega, and at the time it came out, it was following the prevailing horror trends. Games like Amnesia Dark Descent and Outlast were the real trailblazers for this horror subgenre. You know, the stalker horror formula where you play as an essentially helpless victim who's forced to run and hide from things that are hunting you. This game could have been exactly like those games, a linear thrill ride with very little in terms of gameplay systems to back everything up. Instead, the team at Creative Assembly, the guys behind the Total War games, decided to make one of the most elaborate enemy AIs of all time with the Alien, and made the game so much bigger than pretty much any of the other horror games of this type. There are humans that you have to sneak around, there are deadly androids you have to deal with.
I've been looking for you.
And there's the alien that's intelligent and unpredictable and relentless and kills you with zero hesitation. But that's not all there is to this game. There's also the massive interconnected station the game is set on. There's the crafting system that gives you a few tools to help fend off enemies, and the most divisive of all is the hard save system. There are no checkpoints. If you die, you get sent back to the last save point. This save system is just risky as hell. They could have just dropped checkpoints everywhere to make the game less frustrating, but they stuck to their guns and made it so when the alien catches you, it hurts. The alien's ability to catch you anywhere and kill you instantly was also risky. They could have made the alien much more predictable if they wanted to, but they did not want to. They wanted the alien to feel like the ultimate predator, and it does. And that's at the expense of player agency. When you first encounter the alien, it just seems like there is nothing you can do. It feels hopeless, and it can be incredibly frustrating. A lot of people give up on the game at this point, and that's just how the Isolation developers wanted it. It sounds ridiculous, but they may have have literally made a game that is a little too scary. It was just too much for general audiences, and it was considered something of a flop when it originally came out, and it got a lot of middling reviews. It's kind of shocking when you look back on the actual reception of this game, when you consider how beloved it is, but many fans did love it for what it is. Its mystique has kept it alive in the collective gamer conscience. You hear people mention it all the time. For most people I talk to, that's a good thing. Now, it is an extremely frustrating game at times, but you gotta respect the vision this team had. They wanted to make the ultimate Aliens horror game, and they succeeded. Depending on who you talk to, almost too well. At number 8 is Demon's Souls. 2009 was a real strange time for gaming. At the time, the general consensus was that any form of friction in games was bad. Checkpoints had to be plentiful, roadblocks like difficult boss fights were seen as a negative, in-game tutorials needed to explain everything, the list goes on. I'm not saying gamers wanted all of these things. Just in case that's what you think I'm saying, I am saying the game development consensus. I'm also not saying everything about this trend was necessarily terrible. There are actually a lot of very good games that came out of this time, but games are allowed to be difficult, or should be at least, and some games are difficult for their own sake. Doesn't mean a game is bad just because you have to go back to the start of a level when you die. Not everyone loves that, but not everyone hates it. But when Demon's Souls, Dark Souls' predecessor, came out on the PlayStation 3 in 2009, it was a true anomaly. The game was obscure, it was light on story and cinematics, and it was hard. Compared to pretty much every other game in the series, it's actually pretty easy, but everything about this game was new at the time, so even simple mechanics that we take for granted now were seen as being extremely punishing. It's an action game where the combat is slow, methodical, and deadly. If you die, you don't just lose all the souls, which are used as both experience and currency, you also get your life bar cut in half. There are no checkpoints other than bonfires, which are spaced pretty damn far apart. It's all the stuff we've come to expect from these types of games, except the health bar thing. They pretty much all stopped doing that, but everything else is a genre staple at this point. Everything about Demon's Souls feels like the opposite of the prevailing game design options at the time. Its many systems go mostly unexplained, it's full of roadblocks and intentionally unfair challenges that the player is forced to persevere through. It's a game that was designed to be hard in a very old school way at a time when that just was not how games were made. While the game's many design decisions were risky, the actual development wasn't. The game lacked direction and seemed destined for failure when Hidetaka Miyazaki took over the project, and because he knew the game was pretty much written off already, he saw an opportunity to make the kind of game he wanted to play. So to him, the stakes weren't really that high because the project was already in the gutter, so if the final product ended up being bad, well, not his fault. The project was doomed from the start anyway. The game did get a mixed critical reception, but it gathered a cult following fairly quick. And the devs managed to parlay that into a spiritual successor, Dark Souls, and that game was a pretty big success, which just snowballed from there. Now, there's literally a subgenre of action games it all but created, and Elden Ring, which is by all accounts the latest Souls game from, was perhaps the biggest game of 2023. The subgenre is probably the biggest in the industry outside of a few main staples, and making one of these games now is kind of a no-brainer. It's a safe bet, but back in 2009, it was anything but. Moving on to number 7, it's XCOM Enemy Unknown. The thing about game design is that if you're doing anything even remotely new, something you're not 100% confident in right from the start, there is a lot of risk. Making games is an inherently risky business because fun is really subjective. It's ephemeral. It can be very different from person to person. And if you generate a reputation with enough of the wrong people first, it's gonna be hard to get out of it. So, a squad-based tactical shooter, huh? Firaxis knew how to make a Civilization game fun. They'd been making those for many years, so they understood what was addicting and entertaining about that gameplay, but that was that gameplay. The idea for a reboot of the classic XCOM series was something they were thinking about doing for a long time, but they couldn't quite figure out how to do it. The game went through multiple total overhauls before they finally settled on the game it ended up being, which is definitely for the best because everything I've heard about the older builds make it sound like they really dodged a bullet. It wasn't the only risky thing about the game though. You gotta remember, back in 2012, a big budget strategy game that didn't have the name Sid Meier on it was kind of unheard of. Of course there were strategy games out there, but this was before the big PC games boom that happened over the next few years. Now strategy games are all over the place, but back when this came out, it was basically an extremely niche idea. It didn't make sense to put the kind of money they put into this game. The market was just too small for the genre, but the game was so well made and addictive, it just didn't matter. Weirdly enough, it was so well made that without really sacrificing anything, it ended up bringing a casual audience that normally wouldn't play a game like this. Ironically, the safe version of this game, the third-person shooter called The Bureau, flopped, while the game everyone thought wasn't going to get an audience thrived. It's a testament to how good XCOM Enemy Unknown is, and how sticking to modernizing an old-school formula was a great idea despite the fact it seemed like there was just no demand for it. They proved a lot of people wrong with XCOM Enemy Unknown.
Command Central, this is Big Sky. Emergency abort. Squad is down.
And number 6 is Yakuza Like a Dragon. Oh my lord. It's probably one of the wildest genre changes in a long-running series ever, right? Most of the time when a long-running series makes significant changes in gameplay, it's either because there was a big gap between games, like God of War, or they're trend chasing, like with the more action-oriented, later Splinter Cell games. This game took the series, Yakuza, well known for being a beat-em-up, extremely beloved, no reason to change, would have kept selling like hotcakes, into oblivion, and turned it into a JRPG. It's a massive change that completely upends the primary gameplay of the series, and it could have been a disaster because, I mean, it's such a bizarre idea. It's not a fantasy world with the standard RPG trappings. It's a contemporary story set in real-world Japan, yet for some reason they decided to remove the fighting in a game that was famous for the fighting and replace it with a ridiculous turn-based combat system with all the RPG trappings. You got party members, classes to switch to with different abilities. It's about as different as a game can be while still feeling essentially the same. All the stuff surrounding the combat is exactly the same. You are still running around a city district full of activities and side quests. It's just that they're really leaning into the RPG aspects of the franchise this time. There is a reason for all this. The developers clearly wanted to make a hard split with the series now that longtime protagonist Kazuma Kiryu is out of the picture, and anytime a series changes its hero, it's risky, but the game pulls it off well. Some folks aren't huge fans of the new combat style, and I get it. It's just a personal preference thing, but you gotta respect the audacity of the developers that were crazy enough to take this batshit insane idea and run with it. These guys were well aware that it was a risk that might bite them in the ass, and they were absolutely ready to completely abandon the JRPG combat if everyone just rejected it. But for the most part, fans really enjoyed it. It sold well, it's here to stay, at least up through Infinite Wealth. And I mean, let's not lie, even though it's not set in a fantasy world, Yakuza is kind of a bizarre, and I mean very bizarre series, even if it doesn't lean into mystical stuff.
Ready to rumble.
Check this out.
Moving on to number 5, it's Metroid Prime. Taking the classic gameplay of Super Metroid and turning it into an FPS sounded like the recipe for disaster, but much like making Yakuza a JRPG, making Metroid Prime a FPS ended up being an all-time classic. I don't blame anyone for being skeptical of this game back when it first announced, but hey, proof is in the pudding. Now, people were skeptical because it was made by an untested Western studio, keeping in mind Metroid has traditionally been a Japanese game. It'd never not been one. And they did something that sounded completely impossible. Metroid Prime seemed like it was going to be an Other M-style disaster, but it ended up being actually good. Not good, actually. Great. Very, very great. Excellent. Back then, even more than now, the FPS games felt like a place where innovation went to die. So to manage to thread the needle of being an FPS while retaining the exploration elements of the classic games, including the morph ball, in a way that actually feels right, keeps all the enemy designs that feel appropriately Metroid-y. It's just a miracle this worked out the way it did. The most impressive thing this game managed to do was make it feel like a Metroid game. It doesn't feel like a Metroid-themed FPS, which is what everybody feared. It's just a Metroid game. It's got the puzzle solving, it's got the exploration, all kept intact, and if anything, the game is more true to the series than a lot of the actual Metroid games that came after it. It was a risky as hell idea, but the team at Retro Studios really pulled it off, and also honestly really pulled off some crazy graphics crap for the time and for the limited hardware. And number 4 is Divinity Original Sin. You might think that Baldur's Gate 3 was risky, but by the time Larian was making that game, they had pretty much proven they had the chops to make incredible computer RPGs, a hell of a track record, and they were working with one of the most popular properties of all time, Dungeons and Dragons. The game was going to be a success no matter what, it's just that nobody anticipated just how much of a success it ended up being. This game, though, everything was uncertain. It was make or break for Larian. Their previous game, Dragon Commander, was not a big success. They were on their last legs by the time the original Sin Kickstarter started, and if this game didn't make a dent, that was pretty much it for them. If this was going to be their final game, they wanted to make the kind of game they wanted to play. At the time of the Kickstarter, Western-style RPGs were beyond out of vogue. No one was making them at the time, and nobody who was making them was putting a lot of money into them, and they were mostly still just primitive graphics and a whole lot of text. Original Sin was way more ambitious. They had an entirely 3D world. It was highly reactive and systematic, similar to the old Ultima games. They also had a revolutionary idea to include co-op, which at the time seemed like a terrible, terrible idea. I mean, who wanted a 50-hour RPG with a friend? Turns out, the answer was a whole shitload of people. Original Sin was a game that was hard, had a lot of complex systems, and it was turn-based. All big no-nos at the time, but people came in droves. Enough for the developers to make a bigger and better sequel. I wouldn't say this is the game that sparked the whole CRPG revival we're currently enjoying, but compared to most of the other RPGs that came out, like Pathfinder and Pillars of Eternity, which were straight-up throwbacks, Original Sin went its own way and did things differently, taking an old formula but doing something new with it. It was risky as hell, but man did it work out in the end. Moving on to number 3, it's Death Stranding. I would crack my knuckles if I had any, but I am a bird, and saying things like that is the kind of weird that Hideo Kojima has gifted us with time and time again. Hideo Kojima left Konami right before this, and his next game could have been the easiest slam dunk of all time. Just make another Metal Gear Solid with the numbers filed off, and he would have made crazy, crazy bank. I know I would have jumped on that in an instant. I mean, a new Metal Gear without the franchise baggage would have been amazing, but Kojima must have taken the clean break from Konami as an opportunity to do something new and risky. This was, although it had the same name, a new independent game studio, so whatever they made was gonna be risky, but man did they ever go nuts with Death Stranding. Instead of doing the obvious thing, another stealth action game set in a semi-futuristic setting, they made a cuckoo bananas post-apocalyptic FedEx simulator. I mean, of course you didn't have the truck and everything, but the world didn't allow for the truck, okay? The truck wouldn't work in this world. Anyway, your primary goal is to, as implied, deliver goods from one settlement to another. Yeah, that's the main gameplay loop of their AAA celebrity-stacked action game. Conan O'Brien is in this game. It is completely nuts that anyone went along with this, but it came out, it's real, and it's still kind of hard to believe it exists. It's a game that people are also pretty divided about. Some people love it, some hate it, but in the end, it was a pretty big success, to the point that they are making another one of these things, and I just don't understand what the hell that's even going to be, besides another FedEx simulator. You'll notice I didn't mention the story in this point. There's a reason for that. It would have made this a lot longer. It makes no sense. I love it, but it makes no sense. Moving on to number 2, it is The Last Guardian. After games like Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, Japan Studio and Fumito Uedo pretty much had carte blanche to do whatever they wanted for the next game. That's the only explanation for what Sony greenlit. It is an extremely strange, hugely divisive game which does things that in any other game would be seen as unacceptably bad design choices, but here they somehow work despite everything. In The Last Guardian, you are at the mercy of this gigantic bird, dog, cat thing. The primary game mechanic is getting this thing to move. You can pull at it and yell at it, but the actual controls are also pretty vague, intentionally so. Trico, the big creature, seems to have a mind of its own. Sometimes it'll do things, sometimes it won't, and you don't know why. Is the game glitched? Are you doing something wrong? Is this intentional by the game designers? You don't know. And depending on how patient you are, this is all either an intriguingly realistic depiction of pet ownership or the most frustrating gameplay of all time. Control is one of those things in games you just don't screw around with. The players want to know exactly what they're doing at all times, and they want the things they do to have a tangible effect right away. The Last Guardian doesn't do that, at least when it comes to Trico. This game breaks one of the golden rules of game design, and it does it knowingly. That Sony signed off on any of this goes to show just how much respect they had for the director. Even after the game spent years in development hell, they released it like this. And I'm not saying the game was buggy or bad or anything like that. I am saying that most other publishers with the kind of pull that Sony does would be like, make it a game that is better. And the director would probably ask for notes as to how to do that, and they would be like, I have no idea. What are you doing? It was a risk that, in this case, actually didn't pan out. The game does have its diehard fans, but the sales just weren't there, and Sony has been mostly playing it safe. I enjoy it, but also, I kind of think it's funny when I'm playing the game and I think about how people get frustrated with the thing. It does something that would frustrate a different person, and I'm like, haha, everyone played this. I actually do like it, but I'm not gonna lie, there's a little schadenfreude involved there. And finally, at number 1, I got a good one for you here. Shenmue, the most expensive game ever developed at time of development. You'd think it would be something safe like an action game or something, but no, this game was also unlike any other game to come out at the time. It had an unprecedented level of interactivity and control. You could wander around and explore this entire small Japanese town. There was a real-time system, it had weather, it accurately reflected the time period. The game was jam-packed with ambitious and very unusual gameplay systems. But the guy at the head of the project was famous for his arcade games. Nothing about this project made any sense on paper. They were neck deep in uncharted waters the entire time, and the game was made with a level of detail and scale that just had never been attempted. On top of all that, it was built for the Sega Dreamcast, another highly ambitious but risky project for the company, so there was really nothing safe about any of this. It ended up being one of the most innovative and unique games of all time. Compared to most open world games, it's a much more intimate, placid experience. As a game, it's oddly paced, the voice acting is laughably bad.
Morning! Time for a daily warm-up race. You all do your best now. Yeah!
But the graphics were cutting edge and the interactive world was beyond anything we'd ever seen at that point. The game did make some money and there was a lot of diehard fans, but it wasn't enough to make up for all the money that Sega dumped into the game. So after Shenmue 2 didn't see much success either, the series was shelved. The risk just didn't pay off this time, but the innovations they introduced went on to inspire an entire generation of games, even if there's still nothing quite like that first Shenmue game. It's kind of a mess looking back at it, but that's just what happens with a lot of risky projects like this one. It's extremely rare to hit a home run on the first try. Most of the time, truly risky games come out kind of messy, but in an interesting way. I do have a couple of bonuses for you. First, Dead Rising. What was Capcom smoking when they came up with this? A semi-open world zombie game with a constantly ticking real-time clock that combines beat-em-ups and photography. Say that to somebody. Anybody who, gives you money to make games with? I think they would probably laugh you out of whatever place you met them at, an office, a restaurant, whatever. That meeting would be over, and you would hear laughing all the way down the hallway, or sidewalk, or whatever. And this is a weird-ass game, but somehow it works. It works so well, it has a huge following. And a remake coming out that looks awesome. And there are a lot of gameplay elements in this game most people would normally hate, and some people do. A lot of folks really can't get past that time limit, but it's the thing that really gives the series its unique identity. Without it, you get Dead Rising 4, and nobody wants Dead Rising 4.
Frank! What? Wakey, wakey! Why do you keep saying that?
How about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild Doi? I mean, in some ways, it sounds not particularly risky. Making Zelda open world. And it's also kind of hard to call anything made by Nintendo's A-team risky, but Breath of the Wild was such a big departure from the standard Legend of Zelda format that there was a real possibility fans wouldn't accept it. If the game wasn't as good as it is, or more conventional, oddly enough, I can see a lot of people turning on it. I've seen some people turn on Tears of the Kingdom for what I would call basically that reason. I don't know that I think it's a good reason, but I've seen it. It's just Breath of the Wild with weirder crap in it. Yeah, and it's good. Thanks. Still, Zelda but open world sounds not risky and trend chasing, but that is not Breath of the Wild, is it? This game is perhaps one of the most ambitious open world games of all time. The tools you get right from the start of the game, the climbing mechanics, the lack of the usual Ubisoft open world bloat, and the breakable weapons, which are still controversial today. They made the game feel so different, not just from other open world games, but as a Zelda game, or hell, just as a game. It's one of the most thorough reinventions I've ever seen in a long-running franchise, without hopping genres, necessarily. Any one of these choices sounds very risky on its own, but it all worked, and it worked well. Next, I've got Final Fantasy XIV, the relaunch, Realm Reborn. It cannot be understated just how much of a mess Final Fantasy XIV was at launch. It was basically Final Fantasy XI, but worse in every possible way. Square had dumped tons of money into this project, and they were already in trouble financially, so they were stuck in an unprecedented situation. Either keep the game going and accept it as a failure, or completely remake the game from the ground up. It was an extremely risky proposition. I mean, they could have dumped millions of dollars into fixing the game, and it wouldn't have mattered. Could have just made the game worse, or could have alienated what little fan base they had left of it. But against all odds, it worked. Now, A Realm Reborn itself, as a game, wasn't risky. It borrowed very heavily from World of Warcraft, but the decision to just basically do over an MMO, to keep throwing money at it, it sounds like not just a risk, but just burning money. Oh, you all hate this game? Well, how about we spend more money on it and make it again? That sounds like a disaster in the making, and it wasn't. The last one I've got for you today is Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. This is a game that everybody just assumed would be a massive joke. It's Mario and the Rabbids Ubisoft's failed mascot characters somehow slammed together in a tactical strategy game. Nothing about the premise makes any rational sense. Even saying it makes me go, wow, that is just a disaster waiting to happen. But it is anything but that. It works really well. It's not just a great game, it's a great tactical game, which I never thought was going to be possible. It's not even safe when it comes to gameplay. It has a ton of clever ideas that's legitimately innovative for the genre. It is a game that before release sounded like a surefire failure. Most people assumed it was some kind of April Fool's joke. It was that dumb sounding. It still is that dumb sounding, but it came out to great reviews and sold really well. The crossover of Mario and the Rabbids just sounded dumb. Nobody trusted Ubisoft at this point. Everyone hated the Rabbids, and making a tactical game with guns and cover for the Mario characters, just bizarre, but hey, they made it work. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is of course a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Game Ranks.